All right. This is something that has been on my mind going back a while, where I started wanting to write down things that have been frustrating me, but I don't know, in light of recent events, I decided I just want to go over things that have been going on that have been frustrating me, like really since last year, especially during the election cycle into now, and what I think is probably the best solution. And yes, I'm going to say things that there's no way of getting around the political nature of it, though the thing that I think we need to do, hopefully it goes to something that's hopefully deeper and more like rooted in something bigger than a political ideology. And where I'm going with this is in relation to what happened with Charlie Kirk and everything else. But this is going to be off the cuff, so we'll see how it goes. Might be a bad idea, but I think to start, I've just been very frustrated and concerned and disturbed by the way that public discourse has been going. Really, I think when I noticed, back since like the mid to late 2010s, especially because, and I'm going to say I don't consider myself some diehard Republican. I'm not registered, as far as I know, I'm being registered as an independent, I suppose. But that being said, when I see the way the discourse and the rhetoric, because people want to talk about, people on the right insinuating violence and rhetoric, and I'm one to, of course, speak against that. Like the whole thing with that January 6th, the White House thing, like, of course, that's something that shouldn't have been done. It was a foolish thing to take that protest to that level. And I believe 2 people were killed as a result of that event. Though I think they were by officers, I don't know. And as far as I know, arrests were made, and I agree with that. Though no real property damage to my knowledge was relatively minimal, but still, that was a weird time. I think it was overblown. I don't see it as some big attempt at a takeover of the country personally. That doesn't mean I necessarily agree with what it turned into. But as a comparison, I think when I really started to feel this way was what happened in 2020 with things related to COVID and Black Lives Matter and all that stuff. Because, initially with the whole thing with George Floyd, initially when you saw what maybe the cop did and all those things, I was like, okay, like we can maybe have a conversation. Is there things that need to be done for some reform or changes in procedure? But then when people started rioting and destroying, and I think I've heard the numbers, is it how many billions of dollars in property damage? A number of people died. I don't necessarily know who those people are. But for that to be the reaction to those events for an entire summer, also with Antifa doing whatever they were doing in Portland, Oregon, and everywhere else, and with a lot of these organizations being related to more left-leaning things, is just that's the thing. I'm not some political analyst or sociologist or whatever. This is just an observation, and with the Charlie Kirk incident, what has the result of that been? Maybe if there have been little protests or riots from quote unquote right-leaning people, or then okay, so be it. Then I'll decry that. But for the most part, I've been hearing that it's a bunch of vigils and grieving and mourning. Like, I've heard nothing of anything like major or violent going on as a result of that killing. And I'm not making it a race issue, but I guess I am making it a political issue, and is where the origins of those people's opinions come from. Because, for example, like with after the last election of Trump, so many people were, they were appalled and surprised and shocked that he won again, and wondering how that could happen. And again, I have I'll say some moral issues with Trump, and and I think the way he's handled the whole Epstein thing when he ran on that and is now trying to, like, there can be issues with that, and so be it, and I'll be willing to criticize him. That being said, the reason why a lot of people switch is, well, okay, I am a white Christian man, and I might be stereotyping, but I am the stereotypical ideological enemy that people have been complaining about, that are left-leaning for the past, I don't know, at least 10 years at this point, maybe 15 years. And when I hear, whether subtly or obviously, that, oh, like, white men are the problem in this country, Christianity is sexist and misogynist and maybe even fascist, I'm sure someone's tried to tie it to that. When you hear all these negative things, and when you see, like, and it just, okay, that's one thing that's going to bother you a little bit over time. You hear that you're the problem, or that the marginalized people, like, and I'm not against, I don't think anyone is against people having opportunity, but, like, there needs to be responsibility to get to where you're at too. And I have my own, that's the thing, I'm a little conservative some things, like maybe more in a moral, or like the way you interact and, like, do things throughout your life. But there's some things, like regarding the job market and other things, where I might be a little more centrist, or what somebody would call a little left leaning, because of my frustrations and struggles with that. But that's a separate issue. When it comes to just, the see, this is, we go off the cuff, you have the risk of losing your train of thought. But I guess to bring it back to the election and the reaction to it, it's just like, okay, like, you're doing, you're doing this calls for justice and all these things, but the problem is that, like, these calls for justice, like, more legislation really the answer? Is more laws and trying to prop people up? Like, how much of it is help that whoever it is, maybe it's white Christian dudes that have these advantages that you claim that we have, how much of it is up to legislation doing those things, and how much of it comes back to personal responsibility? Because I'm just going to say, people in like the black communities in the cities and whatnot, why do they have such a high number of fatherless homes, and why is there a higher rate of crime? I don't want that to be the truth, and maybe there's some legislation that can help with that, but at what point does it become a cultural issue within that group of people, that people outside of that cannot really change? And that becomes really frustrating. And to bring it to more recent stuff now, like, it's a sad thing. Like, and there's just a lot of stuff, because I've heard that usually the demographic for, like, school shootings tends to be disgruntled and angry young white men, for whatever reason that is. Then you had the stabbing of that Ukrainian woman, I believe her first name is Irina, I don't know her last name at the top of my head, by a schizophrenic black man, with 14 previous arrests. Then there was the shooting of the Catholic school, and I guess possibly also in Tennessee of a Protestant school as well. There's just some really strange and dark stuff that have happened. And the Catholic school and the Charlie Kirk assassination and the Ukrainian woman happened in the last, like, 2 or 3 weeks. And that's just insane to me. And of course, the reaction to those things has just been, I guess I'll ask this question as someone who is a more, I'll say, right-leaning man on a lot of issues. And if you're trying to convince me to kind of, vote differently or to think differently, I'm not entirely opposed, but, like, what reason would I have to vote the other way when the perception that I get is that people related to the Democrat to the left have veered so far, where any questions that are asked, whether it's related to and I don't know if I can say because of if I put this on YouTube, but the thing that got us closed down in 2020, or as Critical Draco would have put it, a virus of an unknown origin, by putting up a picture of Winnie the Pooh in a certain country. What reason would I have, when you have all this violent reactions to people that seem to be tied to issues that they're interested in, like social justice and other things like that? What reason would I have to want to be associated with a side that films themselves going on crazy meltdowns, or on one hand you have that smug professor lady who was gonna buy some champagne or something, then she woke up Kamala's totally gonna win, she's disappointed, and then you have other people crying. You have one woman, just scared and trying to scare her children, and that's the other thing that on top of it, with the Charlie Kirk with Trump's first attempt, the assassination attempt on him, people were angry that the person missed, and with Charlie Kirk, people are celebrating it. That's a level of cruelty that I cannot abide by. Like, to give examples, I have my problem with anyone, but in a way, like with Biden, for example, yes, I'll say I didn't vote for my political disagreements, but when I saw my reaction to when I could clearly see his mental state declining, it wasn't one of anger or anything. It was more like, this man should just be retired, living out the rest of his life, not be involved in politics. And I say that as someone who should be he should get away from the pressure. He should be, and maybe he wanted the power, and that's, anyone that gets power be difficult to give up. But he should be somewhere living out the rest of his life on a farm or a quiet place somewhere. And I don't say that out of anger or spite or because I disagree with him, because that should be what should have been done. That probably would have been best for him. And instead he's being forced to, or maybe he forced himself. I don't know which for sure, of course, but he's stuck as president, and you can tell that he's just not the most fit person. And again, whenever I discuss that with people, I said he's not the most fit. It's not because it isn't necessarily because it's just that's just the case. Or for more extreme stuff, if I heard, and I don't really watch them, and I don't know, of course, I don't know as much about left-leaning political commentators. I don't watch right-leaning that much anymore either. I stopped watching the Daily Wire guys, except Michael Knowles sometimes, because with the whole Israel thing, Ben Shapiro got a little, even before that, I kind of stopped watching him. I find Matt Walsh to be, I don't know, he's someone that comes across as hating everything, and that gets really, I used to like his dry sense of humor, but I don't know, I find him very insensitive. But to go back, Hassan Piker was a popular one, and I think there's another guy named Destiny. I don't know if that's his real name, probably an online name. But if I heard that one of them had been killed, I would be appalled, just as appalled at that, because that is not the way to do things. Yet on the other hand, as someone who likes to, now there's a lot of history I have yet to read. I mostly focus on World War II and a few others. But, someone who knows a little bit about history, violence and politics can often become very intertwined, especially I feel as you see a civilization becoming more degraded. And so I don't want to see those things happen, but with what happened with Charlie Kirk, unfortunately now could be more likely. And that isn't what I want as someone who's, I guess, more right-leaning, if you want to call it that. I don't want to see that as the reaction. Or even a friend of mine and I discussed that with Trump getting into office, and this is where I'm going to kind of go against, the conservative Christians a little bit. If I was at a church where people, because some people try to claim that, Trump is, okay, on one sense, as a Christian, you believe that God divinely will appoint whatever leaders he appoints, whether they're good or bad in some way. Those of you that aren't religious will think that's silly, but that, whatever. But But all that being said, people really proud of Trump in a very unhealthy way, in my opinion. Like, they prayed for it, all this stuff, or that, God protecting it from, and I get feeling that way, but don't prop him up as some religious figure to be idolized. That is the danger with that. And and on the other hand, to kind of go with that train of thought, like the whole thing with Israel, like I do question the idea that we as Christians in America need to support, I'll say Israel as a government. I'll separate the people, but Israel as a government no matter what. Because with that, like, for example, and when Hamas crossed the border and did what they did, where they took innocent people and all this stuff, Israel's response, in my opinion, made sense. Like, they're like, they came across, they took our people, we're going to attack them. And, that's just the unfortunate part of war, is because people talk about the civilians and stuff, and I get it. Like, and the thing is, I wonder how people would have felt during World War II, and if you know what happened between like the Russians and the Germans, how cruel they were to one another. I mean, I'm not justifying it, but what Israel and Palestine are doing pales in comparison to the horrors of World War II. But still, like, that isn't a conflict I want to keep lasting, but that's a complicated thing. But then when Israel turned around and launched missiles on Iran, I was very much like, what are you doing? And a lot of younger people especially were like, if this drags us into another war in the Middle East, we don't want to go. Like, and no, I personally have no close ties to Ukraine or Israel. I do not want to send people to go die in a war for Ukraine and Israel. I don't. And I know a lot of I know some people that are in the Christian persuasion that would heavily disagree with me on that. And again, like, Israel is, as a government, is still an imperfect thing. Like, so they're going to make decisions, do things that we can disagree with and not like. That doesn't mean I want the country to fall off the face of the earth. That doesn't mean I want the people, like, as a Christian, they're God's chosen people, I want to respect that and see them almost as, God chose them first, and then the message was spread to the Gentiles, and I would want to recognize that lineage and that connection. But at the same time, it is fair to criticize a government entity doing something that is foolish. And sending missiles on Iran, I think, was probably foolish. Now, that also being said, that doesn't mean I like Iran. They're very much, I think, an enemy of us. But, and to move on though, like, speaking of enemies though, like, going back to American political stuff, at what point do I just take things like straight for when do I just take the things that you've said at face value? And when I mean you, I think of left-leaning political commentators and even like a lot of news people and stuff, where there had these claims that, like, people Republican establishment, people who are right-leaning, people who questioned like a lot of the social justice stuff, they're all fascists, they're all sexist, they're all these words, if you take them seriously, are horrible, but you've said them so much that they've lost meaning. And in a way, like, and then you could call this the dark side of me, it's like, in a way, I just want to say, okay, yeah, if you think that's what I am, then maybe I'll just say, yes, that is what I am. Because if you said it for long enough, like, it becomes exhausting, and you've lost all meaning of the word. Like, and again, this isn't just like, aggressive like YouTubers or stuff like that. This can be like news people, saying these things, and in trying to be even-handed. Yes, like, if that's right-leaning people also should watch their stuff. And Trump, of course, has said things that are kind of foolish, but like, I don't know, like, people that are left-leaning have openly either been okay or even or heavily alluded to things of violence, or I'll say resistance, at the very least. Or there's that meme of mostly peaceful protests related to Black Lives Matter. Like, what is that? And I'm just sick of being quiet about this, and And there's other things I want to talk about too. Like when I think of someone who I'll say used to, because I'm not, and this will actually really go to my example, as someone who's, when I think of the arts and media and movies and stuff, I was someone who really used to be into film, new movies and whatnot. But lately, I feel like we've been just in like a total hole of creativity. And the ironic part is, even if we got more original movies, I don't know if I go as much because I have a girlfriend now. I'm doing other things, which is good. So I don't have as much time, nor do I want to spend the money to go to the movies as much. But all that being said, like, for me, being a big Star Wars fan, that's a perfect example. And I, like, and I grew up, being a late, in the early 2000s, the Star Wars prequels and stuff. Like, you can have your opinion on those movies. I acknowledge their flaws, and because they're far from perfect, but for better or worse, they're George Lucas's vision. You got a lot of the multimedia stuff and the comics. Then Disney comes in, and I'm initially, not sure, but kind of excited. And then the sequel trilogy came out, and no matter how, but the movies themselves weren't that good, but there was this feeling of like, is there this underlying messaging? And some people want to say that this is like conspiratorial and other things, but in real life, when you have that picture of Kathleen Kennedy wearing a shirt that says "The Force is female," when you have her, I think, telling Rian Johnson, "Oh, he writes strong female characters," and when I think of how those characters were written, like Rey, who, and I don't blame, this should go without saying, I don't blame the only people to blame are the writers and producers and the director. I don't blame the actors and actresses necessarily. But, like, Admiral Holdo, a lot of people thought was an Imperial spy because of how incompetent she was as a commander. Rey's just great at everything and doesn't have to go through any journey of any kind. And it's not obvious, but like, and even with Marvel stuff, like after Endgame, I just like, there's so many of them now that after, I think I saw Multiverse of Madness, and the only other one I saw was the Spider-Man movie. And then I only saw the fourth Captain America because, some friends wanted to go see. And to be honest, I kind of wish I wouldn't have said yes, because it was a waste of time. And this is where I'm going to go, because I have one friend who likes to be a little kinder and nicer when we talk about stuff like that. But maybe it's because I pay attention to other things. I'm a little more critical of movies in general, but I'm like, these movies aren't very good. They have stuff in, whether it's subtle or not, that I think is ridiculous, and I used to be someone that tried to separate the art from the artist, but it's become a lot harder when a lot of the writers and the people that have control of how this stuff goes has a worldview that is completely against mine. And every once in a while, that isn't inherently a wrong, like, they could still make good art. Like, I don't know. There's probably plenty of movies and shows that I like where people would have things that I disagree with, and that's fine. But like, when it becomes more obvious why you're doing the things that you're doing, I check out. And even without it, like, because with the whole Captain America thing, like, there's a lot of like in-universe questions. Like, okay, nothing against Falcon, I like him as a character, but like, he doesn't have, you ask questions like, okay, he doesn't have the serum, so how is he gonna overcome that? And they don't really, he has a suit and stuff, but it's like, well, he's still a regular dude. And I didn't watch I haven't watched any of the Disney Plus shows. I don't care to. But there's the whole thing, with like, you got to do better, Senator. It's like, well, what does that mean? As he's like openly not against the terrorist characters in the show. And I don't know. It just makes it more selective. Now I go more by director rather than just go see anything, because I don't know, there's just so much bad blood with the discourse of movies. Like, if I say I don't like Kenobi and I don't like Reva, people are like, oh, you don't like Reva because you're a racist. And I'm like, no, because she was a bad character. Like, I don't care about Reva. Or, The Acolyte. What trash was that? Like, and I could tell with my friend I want to be a little nicer, but I'm done being nice. Leslie Headland should never touch Star Wars again. Rian Johnson should never touch Star Wars again. JJ can direct, but don't have him write Star Wars. Like Tony Gilroy is like the one person that knew what he was doing. Like Andor is like the one bright spot. And whereas when I read the EU books that someone likes to read, like they're not all 10 out of 10. Like they're not high literature. You're not reading, War and Peace or old classics or anything like that. But at least when I read them, I don't feel like my intelligence is being insulted. I don't feel like, like they feel like a natural continuation of the movies, unlike whatever the heck this stuff is supposed to be. And I guess that was a tangent, but I've just been frustrated with the state of art and film and all that stuff. And I don't pay attention to popular music at all, so I'm not the person to ask about that stuff. But I've heard that like the complexity and the way it sounded and stuff has become a lot more simplified and streamlined, and I highly doubt I would enjoy that type of music. And I guess it's not wrong, but going back to movies and stuff though, because again, this friend of mine would say, oh, like, okay, you can not enjoy it, but it's okay if other people do. But I'm like, but what is it saying? Like, what is if we're promoting things that aren't that good, like, and we encourage more things to be made like it, then what are we saying? Like, okay, if someone liked and I did watch The Acolyte, I actually did sit through that. If they liked it just for the action scenes and stuff, I'm like, okay, fine. But if they make more things with that same type of terrible writing, it's like, well, what is that saying? As a, like, I'm thinking of this in a bigger sense of how we view, Star Wars and like maybe what these things are supposed to say. Because the show itself was, it was kind of anti-Jedi and all this stuff. And I know as an institution there are issues. And I took that to mean, knowing Leslie Headland's background a little bit, was it like a metaphor for anti-religious organizations or something? And if that's the case, of course, why would I be okay with that? And and that's even without mentioning the in-universe canonical problems I have with the show. I don't know if there's anything else. Like, I guess I'll go back to the political stuff again. Like, I'm not some hyper conservative or whatever, but like with what happened again with Charlie Kirk and all that stuff, like, what reason would I have to vote Democrat knowing the people that are associated with it? Like, and I've said, and I know people had a problem with them, but I had RFK maybe been brought up as the Democrat candidate in the last election, that would have made me think about it a little bit, because like he might have some stuff I disagree. I know he said some people that, oh, they say he's crazy or whatever, but at the same time, like, he was seem far more reasonable to me than people like, I'm gonna say AOC or or Kamala or all these people. Like, and look at that. It's funny, like, they ostracized him and he joined with Trump's team. It's like, what does that say? Or I love how people are saying, oh, we need a left-leaning Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is like a center-left dude, like, or at least has been for a long time. You're the ones that pushed him away because he's willing to talk to anybody. Like, it's... I'd much rather listen and have a conversation with Joe Rogan, who is probably a center-left dude, than, I don't know, someone like... Again, I can't say for sure, but based on what clips I've seen, like Hassan Piker, who is, straight up... I think he was one... Was it during the Trump thing when someone died there? He had no remorse. He didn't care, and that just seems wrong to me. Not that goes beyond wrong to being wicked. All this being said, and this wasn't as coherent as I would have liked it to be because doing it off the cuff, but the solution that I would think of is, and people are going to probably cringe at this, but I don't care. I have to say something, is there needs to be some sort of return to a centralized culture or tradition. And yes, a lot that can tie into religiosity, and that's the thing I wonder, because people have, I guess before I get to that, one thing more I will say is that we talk about wanting to coexist, whether it's politically or you see the religious ones with from different religions stuff, but I start to wonder if that really is possible. And this also ties into the argument with immigration too, where people are like, oh, Jesus stuff would do. I agree. In ideally, there wouldn't be a need for borders. There wouldn't be a need for all this stuff. But we live in a fallen world. And if you're a Christian person that is very open to immigration, I understand. But at the same time, because it's always a but, like, there's nothing in the Bible, like, God supported Israel's sovereignty, and he also punished them. So to know what, with what's happening in the UK, for example, where people are being arrested for flying the British flag and their English flag specifically, not the Union Jack, but the white and red one, and where they're protesting, where I think London is no longer majority ethnically English. And I'm like, I don't think that's a good thing. Not because I'm against immigrants wanting to come to the Western world, but the thing is they need to assimilate. And that just needs to happen, because I don't think a Middle Eastern Muslim or that type of tradition or culture, like, you can have your little subcultures, and this includes in America, you can have your little things, but there needs to be a level of assimilation. And I don't know why there isn't that expectation. Like, for us to go the other way, I feel like we'd have that expectation. Like, if I go to Japan or Europe or anywhere, I would not, assuming they have a democratic system, I wouldn't expect to be able to vote in their things. I wouldn't be able to expect to take advantage of any of the social programs. I'd have to assimilate, learn the language. Why isn't the expectation done the other way? Like, unless you just don't care about the traditions that we have and think that we can have all these different things all at once. That's just not how humans work, unless we carve up our country or something like that. So that to me says, that's why I think that that's the solution, to look back into, what, and I want to read more of this myself. What did the Greek and Roman philosophers say as they built Western civilization? What does the Bible say? And I won't even say you have to take those stories literally. Like, you don't have to be a believer, but what do they say about human nature? What do they say about the way we should interact in the world? And at the very least, we should go back to wanting to devote ourselves to something beyond ourselves, an ideal. And that, and whether people like to admit it or not, Christianity, and even going back to those ideas of the Greek philosophers, where, and again, I could be wrong, but I think a big idea is they're like these three divine concepts of truth, goodness, and beauty, as being like the three things, ideal things that we should strive to have in our cultures. And I agree with that. I want to come back to something like that, because, like, when I look at this modern secular world that just promotes making as much money as possible, being as cringy as possible on sites like LinkedIn, trying to backstab and rise up, or join this political organization because you're angry. Like, this isn't beautiful. This isn't fulfilling. We're eternally online all the time, and I know the irony of me doing this on a phone, but like, I've said many times that, honestly, besides like the ease of access to food and modern medicine, there isn't a lot of things I really like about modern life. There might be a few more things, but this is why I'm reading more like older books, and I haven't really played a video game very much lately. I still watch movies once in a while, but even with movies, I'd prefer physical media if I can get it. Like, I don't know, this, because, and I feel like I haven't really been able to like articulate this or talk to people about it in a way that I felt comfortable or like doing it. So I just wanted to say all of this here. Even a small thing, like I talked about how like modern Western architecture is purely made for more what's the word, utility maybe, or usefulness, rather than like beauty and things. And not being, this isn't to say there aren't some lovely buildings even in America and other things like that, but like, you may have seen that meme where you have like a picture of Rome or other stuff where, and what does the architecture say? You're part of a great civilization, you should live your life and be proud. And then you have these modern, almost brutalist type things you see in like Eastern Europe, or like these weird gray buildings and stuff. And what does that say? Like, it seems like a subtle thing. And one of my other friends just didn't really take that the way that I did when I brought it up. And I'm like, how do you not see that? I know it's a small thing, but all that stuff reflects where we're at. Or going back to art, like, actually one good, like with the banana with the duct tape thing, like, that's not art. Like, that isn't art. And I want art. Like, I'm by no means a physical specimen, but like, I don't need or want art and statues of people that like, are ugly and frumpy. I don't want that. Like, and I don't care what people say they want that. I guess that's something. My capacity for sympathy for all these complaints and stuff also gets lower and lower. And as a Christian person, it's like, and I guess I'll end it again by saying, like, that's the thing we need to go back to. And I'm trying to do my best where I read my Bible to interpret it and understand it, so that I'm rooted in something beyond this world, like an ideal that I can strive towards. Like, and I think we need to start teaching, like, and maybe we are, but by and large, like, start teaching, like, what do the Greek philosophers say? What do the old myths say about humanity? What does the Bible say? Or stuff like maybe Arabian, I haven't read them, but stuff like Arabian Nights. Feel free to look at other cultures, ancient things. And because this whole idea too that we're past our past idea of being evil or primitive and all this stuff, like, that's just complete nonsense. Like, I don't know. There's just a lot of things I'm frustrated by. And all I can do is pray, and I'm going to stay connected with the church I'm a part of, the people that I love in my life, and go from there. Just keep, because what else can we do? That's all I have. Have a blessed day.